Moving on, I think what's next is important to recognize that we all have individual perspectives. So what I mean by that is that we can all view the same object in very different lights. So it is important to understand we cannot speak for, none of us can speak for an entire ethnic group or an entire race, and we can only speak for our own personal experience. And for an example of that, I'm going to move on to my next participant. Gabi, she's a 20-year-old political science major. I met Gabi in fall of 2007. She was born in Michoacán, Mexico. It's the same participant for Safi's study. She moved to Hickory in North Carolina at the age of 9 years old. And for this section, I'd like to read to you a little bit from my ethnography. This section of my ethnography is titled Mexican Thanksgiving. So I'm going to take a second because I'm about out of breath and dying out there. Okay. Gabi and I have had many conversations about hyphens. Part of that hyphen, for both Gabi and me, is that of an indigenous American. Holidays such as Columbus Day, and believe me, it pains me to capitalize that prick's name, and Thanksgiving are interpreted by many Native Americans as celebrations of the massacre and subjugation of indigenous peoples by European colonizers. So it surprises me when Gabi expressed a desire for Ola to observe Thanksgiving together. She mentioned her idea to me in mid-October, to which I replied with some choice expletives. She tried to let me know that she understood my objections but still loved the holiday. I thought the conversation was dead until a few weeks later it came up again at an Ola officers meeting. The topic of the meeting was how to get new ideas for events in Ola. I let everyone know I wouldn't turn ideas down. Gabi pounced at the opportunity. She said, Ola Thanksgiving. And before I could say no, Safi shot a look at me as if to say, you better shut your mouth. Gabi won. We decided to have Ola Thanksgiving the Sunday before break. The Friday and Saturday before fall break was the conference at UNC Asheville entitled Living In, Living With Diversity. On Saturday morning, I participated in an immigration realities workshop. The turnout for the workshop was very low, since everyone in the workshop was either an organizer or an Ola member. We decided to make the workshop more personal. The 7 of us, including Gabi, sat in a circle. We started telling our personal migration stories. When it was time for Gabi to tell her story, she told me that when her parents decided to leave the US, to move to the US, they could only get visas for themselves and 2 of her siblings. This meant that most of her family would move to the US without her and her sisters, Veronica y Adriana. At 9 years old, Gabi had to live apart from her family for 9 months. Gabi described how difficult this was for her without her parents. Finally, the 3 sisters were able to receive visas and move to the US. The day they met their parents in Texas was the day before Thanksgiving. When Gabi said that, she turned to me, and with the understanding and soft gaze that only Gabi can give, she told me that what she'd been trying to communicate to me for nearly a month, that we all have our own stories and our own associations with events. For Gabi, Thanksgiving does not conjure images of indigenous people being massacred. Rather, Thanksgiving means a reunification of family. The next day, Ola had our Thanksgiving meal at Safi's house. We all shared her tiny kitchen. We ate baked chicken, maduros, mac and cheese, ensalada de mango, French bread, pies, pan dulce, deviled eggs, and more. As we filled our bellies, we sat around Safi's living room and talked about the diversity conference. After about 20 minutes, I asked Gabi to share her story. When she was done telling her tale, everyone was quiet. I broke the silence by saying, and then I felt like an asshole. Everyone laughed in agreement that indeed, I had been an asshole. Moving on, I'm going to start talking about race and fluidity. Race in the United States, as it's seen in the United States, is seen as a very rigid construct. You know, you are black and you are white, and this really comes from, or white, This really stems from slavery, from the history of slavery and the legacy of slavery. In the South, in Jim Crow laws, there was the one-drop rule, which meant that if you had one drop of African-American descent, you were black. So this creates a really rigid dichotomy. Blood quantum laws for Native Americans calculated ethnicity and race by its sheer percentages. By your father is white, your mother is indigenous, that means you're 50%. Indigenous, 50%. And ethnicity, that's not how ethnicity works. Ethnicity is much more about experience rather than pure blood percentages, right? So, so it leaves little room for hyphenated people to, for their fluidity of their race and their ethnicity. You have to be one or the other. So how do we resist these rigid constructs of race and ethnicity? With that, I'll move on to my next participant. Asha is a 20-year-old international studies major here at UNCA. I met Asha in spring of 2008 through Ola. Her father is from India. Her mother is Irish American. That's her and her mother there. Asha was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. She was also born with a cleft lip and palate, which she's had a lot of surgeries to repair, and it really, as she constructs her identity, it really plays a central theme in her identity. So I'm going to play for you a poem that Asha read to me, and think about this in terms of resistance to rigid constructs of race and identity.